The Silent Watcher's Captain Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Station Alpha 7, watching the stars with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 15 years protecting humanity's frontier. The coffee in her hands had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the tactical display showing the steady advance of the Zephyrian Empire across the outer rim worlds. The Zephyrians were methodical predators. They swept through star systems like a plague, consuming resources and enslaving populations with ruthless efficiency. Their technology was superior to most galactic species, their military doctrine refined through centuries of conquest. What made them truly dangerous was their patience. They studied each target for months, learning weaknesses before striking with overwhelming force. Earth had been watching them for 3 years now, ever since they first appeared on the galactic stage. Humanity's official policy was one of cautious neutrality. They maintained trade relations, sent diplomatic envoys, and publicly advocated for peaceful coexistence. Behind the scenes, however, things were very different. Commander James Rodriguez entered the observation lounge, his expression grim. "Sarah, we need to talk. Priority Alpha communication from Earth Command." Chen followed him to the secure communications room, where the holographic image of Admiral Victoria Stone materialized. Stone was old-school military, having served through humanity's colonial expansion period. Her weathered face bore the scars of someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with the consequences. "Captain Chen, Commander Rodriguez," Stone began without preamble. "The situation has escalated. 2 hours ago, the Zephyrians attacked New Geneva. The colony is gone. 3 million civilians, including the research station where Dr. Marcus Webb was developing the quantum resonance technology." Chen felt the blood drain from her face. New Geneva wasn't just another colony. It was home to humanity's most advanced research facilities, and more importantly, it was where her sister lived. "Survivors, Admiral?" 17. They were off-world, on a supply run. Stone's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Sarah, your sister. She was at the research facility when they hit." The weight of loss hit Chen like a physical blow, but years of military training kept her standing. Rodriguez placed a steadying hand on her shoulder as she processed the information. The Zephyrians hadn't just attacked a human colony. They had declared war on everything humanity held sacred. "What are our orders, Admiral?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carefully controlled. Stone leaned forward, her eyes hard as steel. "As of 800 hours Earth Standard Time, the Global Defense Council has authorized the activation of Project Prometheus. We are no longer observers, people. We are at war." Project Prometheus. Chen had heard whispers about it in the deepest classified briefings. While humanity had maintained its peaceful facade, they had been preparing for this day. The project represented 30 years of secret military development, hidden research stations, and technologies that even she didn't fully understand. "The Zephyrians think they know us," Stone continued. "They've observed our trade vessels, our diplomatic corps, our colonial infrastructure. They see a species barely 200 years into space travel, still fighting among ourselves over resources and territories. They think we're weak, divided, primitive." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "They're about to learn otherwise." "Exactly. Captain Chen, you're being reassigned to the UES Retribution. Commander Rodriguez, you'll be taking charge of the new Rapid Response Fleet. Both of your commands will be equipped with Prometheus technology." Stone paused, her expression becoming almost predatory. "It's time to show the galaxy what humans do when someone hurts our family." The briefing continued for another hour, covering deployment schedules, target priorities, and rules of engagement. When it ended, Chen found herself staring at the technical specifications for her new ship. The UES Retribution wasn't just a warship. It was a completely new class of vessel, built around technologies that shouldn't have been possible. The quantum displacement drives allowed for instantaneous travel across vast distances. The neural interface systems let human commanders control entire fleets with thought-speed reactions. Most impressive were the adaptive weapon systems that could modify their properties in real time based on enemy defenses. This is insane, Rodriguez muttered, reviewing similar specifications for his fleet command systems. How long have they been working on this stuff? Since the moment we detected the first Zephyrian scout ship in our territory, Chen replied, understanding dawning. They've been planning for this war longer than the Zephyrians have been planning their conquest. 3 days later, Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as it dropped out of quantum displacement near the Kepler 442 system. The Zephyrians had established a forward base here, using it as a staging ground for attacks on human colonies. It would be humanity's first official military action against the Empire. The Zephyrian response was immediate and predictable. 3 heavy cruisers moved to intercept, their formations textbook examples of Imperial naval doctrine. Chen watched their approach with clinical interest, noting how they positioned themselves to maximize firepower while minimizing risk. Incoming transmission, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. The Zephyrian commander wants to discuss terms of surrender. Chen almost smiled. Put him through. The holographic image of a tall reptilian being appeared on the bridge. His scales were a deep purple, marking him as military nobility within the Zephyrian hierarchy. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogant confidence of someone who had never experienced defeat. I am Battle Commander Zekver of the Imperial Third Fleet. Human vessel, you will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your species' brief experiment with resistance ends here. Battle Commander, Chen replied calmly. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Corps. I'm afraid I have to decline your generous offer. Instead, I'd like to make a counter-proposal. Zekvar's head crest flared with amusement. You are in no position to negotiate, primitive. My 3 ships outgun your single vessel by a factor of 10. That's where you're wrong, Chen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You see, you made a critical error in judgment. You assumed that what you've seen of humanity represents what we're actually capable of. You thought attacking our families would make us surrender. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on the alien commander. Instead, you've given us permission to stop pretending to be civilized. The transmission cut as Chen gave the order to engage. The Retribution's adaptive weapon systems came online, analyzing the Zephyrian ship's defensive capabilities in microseconds. What followed wasn't so much a battle as a demonstration of technological superiority, so complete that it redefined the very concept of space warfare. The first Zephyrian cruiser simply ceased to exist as the Retribution's quantum disruptor weapons tore apart its molecular structure. The second managed to fire 3 shots before its entire electronic suite was overwhelmed by humanity's electronic warfare systems, leaving it dead in space. The third cruiser attempted to retreat, but found its escape route blocked by the sudden appearance of 2 more human vessels that had quantum displaced directly into its path. In less than 10 minutes, the engagement was over. 3 Zephyrian capital ships had been neutralized with 0 human casualties, but Chen wasn't finished. Open a channel to the Zephyrian home fleet, she ordered. All frequencies, maximum power. When the connection established, Chen found herself facing a room full of Zephyrian military leaders. Their expressions ranged from shock to disbelief to growing fear as they processed what they were seeing. Attention, Zephyrian Empire, Chen began, her voice carrying across countless star systems. 3 hours ago, you attacked our colony at New Geneva. You murdered 3 million innocent people, including families, children, and researchers whose only crime was being human. You did this because you thought we were weak. You thought we wouldn't fight back. You thought wrong. She gestured to the tactical display showing the remains of the Zephyrian forward base. This is what happens when you mistake human restraint for human weakness. For 3 years, we watched you conquer and enslave other species. We could have stopped you at any time, but we hoped diplomacy might prevail. You've ended that hope. The silence from the Zephyrian leadership was deafening. Chen continued, her voice growing harder with each word. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when threatened. You're about to get a comprehensive demonstration. We're not the primitive species you thought you were conquering. We're the species that survived ice ages, world wars, and planetary disasters by adapting, evolving, and never ever giving up. And now you've given us something we've never had before. A common enemy that unites every human in the galaxy. Chen paused, letting the implications sink in. The war you started ends in one of two ways. Either you surrender unconditionally and make reparations for your crimes, or we demonstrate why every other species in this galaxy learned to leave humanity alone. You have 72 hours to decide. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the retribution in contemplative silence. Rodriguez's image appeared on the communication screen, his expression mixing admiration with concern. Sarah, that was either the most brilliant psychological warfare operation in human history, or you just declared war on the largest military power in the galaxy. Chen looked out at the stars, thinking of her sister, and the millions of other humans who had died simply because they existed. Maybe both, James, but they needed to understand something important. Which is? Humans don't start wars, Chen said quietly. But we sure as hell finish them. The Predator's response, Admiral Kexthor of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy, stood in the war room of the flagship Dominion's Edge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he studied the tactical displays. The holographic star map showed the Empire's vast territory spanning 1,200 star systems, each one marked with the crimson symbol of Zephyrian control. It was an impressive sight, representing 3 centuries of methodical conquest and expansion. But today, something had changed. A small section of the map now pulsed with an ominous amber warning signal, indicating contested space. The humans had not only survived the initial confrontation at Kepler 442, they had somehow managed to neutralize an entire Zephyrian battle group with minimal losses. Impossible, muttered Battle Commander Hextane, Kexthor's chief of staff. Our intelligence reports indicated the humans possessed only basic space warfare capabilities. Chemical propulsion, primitive energy weapons, no significant fleet presence beyond system defense platforms. Kexthor's crest twitched with irritation. Clearly our intelligence was flawed. The question now is, what are we actually facing? The tactical briefing continued as subordinate officers presented their analysis of the human attack. The weapon signatures were unlike anything in the Zephyrian database. The humans had somehow manipulated matter at the quantum level, creating destructive effects that bypassed conventional shielding. More disturbing was their apparent mastery of instantaneous travel, allowing them to appear anywhere in a system without warning. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Veltar, we're receiving priority transmissions from across the frontier. The humans have launched simultaneous attacks on 17 forward outposts. All have gone silent within the past 6 hours. Kexthor felt a chill run through his reptilian nervous system. 17 coordinated strikes across a front spanning dozens of light years meant the humans possessed not just advanced technology, but sophisticated command and control capabilities. This wasn't the response of a primitive species lashing out in desperation. This was a carefully orchestrated military campaign. Recall all reconnaissance fleets to defensive positions, he ordered, and get me a priority channel to the High Command. They need to understand what we're dealing with. 2 hours later, Kexthor found himself in holographic conference with the Empire's supreme military leadership. The circular chamber on the Zephyrian homeworld contained the most powerful beings in known space, each commanding fleets capable of reducing entire star systems to rubble. Supreme Admiral Vexcalar dominated the gathering, her ancient scarred hide marking her as a veteran of the Empire's greatest conquests. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Admiral Kexthor, explain to me how a species we dismissed as barely space-capable has managed to eliminate 23 military installations in a single day. Kexthor chose his words carefully. Supreme Admiral, it appears our initial assessment of human capabilities was significantly flawed. They possess technologies we did not know existed, and more importantly, they appear to have been preparing for this conflict for some time. Preparing how? Demanded Fleet Admiral Zorthak. Our surveillance showed them engaged in trivial internal conflicts over resources and territory. Their military vessels were crude, their weapons primitive, which suggests Kexthor replied grimly that what we observed was either outdated or deliberately misleading. The humans may have been intentionally concealing their true capabilities while studying our methods. The implications of this statement sent ripples of unease through the assembled leadership. The Zephyrian Empire had built its dominance on superior intelligence and technological advantage. The possibility that they had been deceived by what they considered an inferior species was both humiliating and terrifying. Supreme Admiral Vex Kalar leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Show me the tactical analysis of their weapons." The holographic display shifted to show the destruction at Kepler 442. The Zephyrian vessels hadn't been simply destroyed. They had been systematically disabled using precision that suggested intimate knowledge of their design specifications. "Notice here," Kexthor pointed to specific damage patterns. "They targeted our primary power relays first, then communications, then weapon systems. They knew exactly where our vulnerabilities were located. This isn't luck or superior firepower. This is surgical precision based on detailed intelligence." Fleet Admiral Morgeth, responsible for the Empire's eastern territories, spoke up. "If they have such capabilities, why haven't they used them before? Why allow us to conquer the outer rim worlds without interference?" "Because," said a new voice, "they were learning." The assembled admirals turned as Intelligence Director Krillnex entered the chamber. The intelligence chief was unusual among Zephyrians, smaller and more cerebral than the typical military leadership. His role required him to think like other species to understand their motivations and capabilities. "Director," acknowledged Supreme Admiral Vex Kalar. "Share your analysis." Krillnex activated his portable data display, showing a timeline of human activities over the past 3 years. "We've been monitoring human communications, trade patterns, and military movements since first contact. What we initially interpreted as typical interspecies commerce was actually an elaborate intelligence-gathering operation." The display showed seemingly innocent trade routes that just happened to pass near major Zephyrian installations. Diplomatic exchanges that focused heavily on military history and tactical doctrine. Research expeditions to systems that provided perfect observation points for Imperial fleet movements. "They've been watching us," Krillnex continued, "learning our patterns, studying our technology, mapping our defenses. Every interaction we had with them was an opportunity for them to gather intelligence while revealing nothing meaningful about their own capabilities." Admiral Kexthor felt the pieces falling into place. "The colony at New Geneva. They let us attack it." "Not exactly," Krillnex corrected. "The attack was real, the casualties genuine, but they knew it was coming. Their most valuable personnel were evacuated before our assault. The research facilities were mostly empty, their critical data already transferred elsewhere." Supreme Admiral Vex Kalar's crest flared with rage. "They used their own people as bait?" "They sacrificed the few to save the many," Krillnex replied. "And more importantly, they used our attack to justify abandoning their peaceful facade. The assault on New Geneva wasn't just a military target for them. It was a declaration of war that united their entire species behind a single cause." "Theo?" Chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Zephyrian Empire had not attacked a weak, divided species. They had attacked a unified civilization that had been preparing for war while presenting an illusion of vulnerability. "Recommendations?" demanded Vex Kalar. Fleet Admiral Zorthak was the first to speak. "Immediate full-scale assault. Deploy the Grand Armada against their home system. End this before they can fully mobilize." "Inadvisable," countered Krillnex. "If they've been preparing for this conflict, their home system will be their strongest defensive position. A direct assault would play into their hands." "Then what do you suggest?" Kexthor asked. "Strategic withdrawal to prepared positions. Force them to come to us where we can utilize our numerical superiority and establish defensive networks." Supreme Admiral Vex Kalar considered both options before speaking. "We will pursue a two-pronged strategy. Admiral Kexthor will lead a defensive consolidation of our core territories. Fleet Admiral Zorthak will take the Grand Armada and probe the humans' outer colonies, testing their response capabilities while avoiding direct confrontation with their main fleet." The conference concluded with detailed operational planning. As the holographic projections faded, Kexthor found himself alone with his thoughts. For the first time in his century-long military career, he was facing an enemy that had outmaneuvered him before the first shot was fired. 3 days later, his concerns proved prophetic. Fleet Admiral Zorthak's probe of human territory resulted in the complete destruction of an entire Zephyrian battle fleet. The humans didn't just defeat the attacking force, they eliminated it so thoroughly that no survivors remained to report what had happened. The tactical recordings recovered from automated probes told a terrifying story. The human defense had been coordinated across multiple star systems, with their ships appearing and disappearing through quantum displacement technology that made conventional tactical doctrine obsolete. Their weapons adapted in real time to overcome Zephyrian defenses, while their electronic warfare capabilities turned the Empire's own systems against them. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the technological superiority. It was the methodical, almost clinical efficiency with which the humans conducted the battle. There was no rage, no chaos, no desperate struggle. Just cold, calculated violence, applied with surgical precision. Kexthor realized he was no longer facing an enemy. He was facing an apex predator that had been disguised as prey, and now the hunt had begun in earnest. As reports continued to arrive of human advances across the frontier, one thing became clear. The Zephyrian Empire had awakened something that would not stop until either they were destroyed, or the galaxy itself was remade according to human terms. The war they had started was about to become the war that ended them. A galaxy transformed 6 months after the destruction of Fleet Admiral Zorthak's armada, Supreme Admiral Vexcalar stood in the emergency command center deep beneath the Zephyrian homeworld's surface. The once mighty empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3 centuries was crumbling, and she was watching it happen in real time through tactical displays that showed system after system falling to human forces. The humans hadn't just responded to Zephyrian aggression, they had revolutionized the very concept of interstellar warfare. Their quantum displacement technology allowed them to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Their adaptive weapon systems rendered conventional defenses useless. Most disturbing of all, they had somehow convinced dozens of formerly subjugated species to join their cause, creating an alliance that grew stronger with each victory. "Status report," Vexcalar demanded, her voice betraying none of the desperation she felt. Intelligence Director Krillnex approached with the latest analysis, his usual composure cracked by months of delivering increasingly dire news. "Supreme Admiral, we've lost contact with the Rigel sector. The humans have established a forward command base at the former mining colonies and are using it to coordinate liberation operations across the region." "Liberation," Vexcalar repeated bitterly. "They've turned our own propaganda against us." And it was true. The humans had demonstrated something the Zephyrian Empire had never bothered with. They actually freed the worlds they conquered. Species that had suffered under imperial rule for generations suddenly found themselves with autonomy, technology, and most importantly, protection from retribution. The tactical situation had become impossible. Every world the humans liberated became a potential base of operations. Every species they freed became potential allies. The Empire's vast size, once its greatest strength, had become a liability as they found themselves fighting on hundreds of fronts simultaneously. "Ma'am," interrupted Communications Officer Veltar, "we're receiving a transmission on all channels. It's from the human commander." Captain Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main display, broadcasting from the bridge of a ship that dwarfed anything in the Zephyrian fleet. Behind her, the view screen showed a massive fleet stretching beyond the horizon, vessels from dozens of different species flying in perfect formation under human command. "Supreme Admiral Vexcalar," Chen began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Corps, commanding the Galactic Liberation Fleet. I believe it's time we had a conversation." Vexcalar straightened, drawing on centuries of military tradition to maintain her dignity. "Captain Chen, I assume you're here to demand our surrender. Actually, no. Chen's response surprised everyone in the command center. I'm here to offer you a chance to be part of the solution instead of the problem. The silence stretched for several seconds before Vexcalar responded. Explain. The Zephyrian Empire as it existed is finished, Chen stated matter-of-factly. Your military has been broken, your territory liberated, your subject species freed. But that doesn't mean the Zephyrian people have to suffer for the crimes of their leadership. Chen gestured, and the display shifted to show detailed plans. For post-war reconstruction, we've established the Galactic Cooperation Alliance. Every liberated world has representation. Every species has a voice. Every individual has rights that cannot be violated by imperial decree. And the Zephyrians? Vexcalar asked, genuinely, curious despite herself, would be welcome to join under the same terms as everyone else. Full participation in galactic governance, protection under alliance law, access to shared technology and resources. The only requirement is accepting that the age of conquest is over. Admiral Kexthor, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. And our military leadership? Those responsible for the Empire's actions? Chen's expression hardened slightly. War crimes tribunals will be established. Those who ordered or participated in genocide, slavery, or other atrocities will face justice. But we're not interested in revenge. We want accountability, truth, and guarantees that these crimes won't be repeated. The offer was more generous than anything Vexcalar had expected. The humans could have simply exterminated the Zephyrian species, as the Empire had done to so many others. Instead, they were offering integration into a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. Why? Vexcalar asked. Why show mercy to those who would have shown you none? Chen was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. Because someone has to break the cycle. For too long, this galaxy has operated on the principle that might makes right. Strong species dominate weak ones. Empires rise through conquest. Peace is just the time between wars. We have the power to change that. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. Supreme Admiral, your empire had the strength to conquer hundreds of worlds, but it never had the wisdom to build something lasting. We're offering you the chance to help build a galaxy where species cooperate instead of competing, where conflicts are resolved through diplomacy instead of warfare, where no child of any species has to grow up in fear of conquest. The command center remained silent as Vexcalar considered the offer. Around her, officers who had dedicated their lives to imperial service struggled with the concept of a galaxy without the Empire at its center. Finally, she spoke. What guarantees do we have that this alliance won't simply become another empire with humanity at its head? None, Chen admitted. Except this. We've deliberately structured the alliance to prevent any single species from dominating. Humans have no special privileges, no permanent leadership positions, no veto power over alliance decisions. We're just another voice in the galactic community. To prove her point, Chen stepped aside, revealing that her bridge crew included representatives from at least a dozen different species, all wearing the same uniform and working as equals. Krillnex activated his personal communicator, quickly, accessing Alliance databases that were surprisingly open to examination. Supreme Admiral, their governmental structure is genuine. No species holds more than proportional representation. Decision-making is genuinely democratic. And their military? Vexcalar asked. Integrated command structure, Chen replied. Human, technology combined with the expertise and personnel of every member species. We've proven that cooperation is more effective than domination. The evidence was overwhelming. In 6 months, the Alliance had accomplished what the Empire hadn't achieved in centuries. True interstellar cooperation. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together. Technologies that had been hoarded by ruling classes were shared freely. Conflicts that had simmered for generations were being resolved through mediation and compromise. I need to consult with the ruling council, Vexcalar said finally. Of course, but Supreme Admiral, time is limited. There are elements within the Alliance who favor a more punitive approach to the Zephyrian leadership. The longer this war continues, the harder it becomes for moderate voices to prevail. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in contemplative silence. Over the next several hours, Vexcalar found herself in intense discussions with the surviving members of the Zephyrian leadership. The debate was fierce, with hardliners advocating for continued resistance despite the hopeless military situation. It was Kexthor who ultimately swayed the decision. "Fellow officers, we swore an oath to serve the Zephyrian people, not the Empire, not the territory, not the ideology, but the people. Continuing this war serves no one except our own pride." The vote was close, but ultimately the council agreed to Chen's terms. The formal surrender ceremony took place on the neutral world of Kepler Prime, with representatives from every Alliance species in attendance. As Vexcalar signed the documents that formally ended the Zephyrian Empire, she found herself face to face with Captain Chen. The human officer was smaller than most Zephyrians, unremarkable in appearance, yet she had accomplished what no general in galactic history had managed: the complete transformation of interstellar civilization. "Captain," Vexcalar said quietly, "what happens now?" Chen smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Now we build something better, together." The ceremony concluded with the signing of the Galactic Cooperation Charter, establishing principles of interstellar law that prioritized cooperation over conquest, diplomacy over warfare, and justice over might. Every former empire, every liberated world, every species that had suffered under imperial rule had a voice in shaping the galaxy's future. 5 years later, Admiral Sarah Chen, she had accepted promotion to oversee Alliance naval operations, stood on the observation deck of Station Unity, the Alliance's mobile capital that traveled between member worlds to ensure no single planet dominated galactic governance. The view outside showed something unprecedented in galactic history: ships from hundreds of different species working together to construct massive space habitats that would serve as neutral meeting grounds for interstellar diplomacy. Former enemies collaborated on scientific research. Technologies were shared freely. Conflicts were resolved through mediation rather than warfare. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still occasional conflicts that required careful management. But for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was at peace not because one power had conquered all others, but because all powers had chosen cooperation over conquest. Chen thought of her sister, of the millions who had died at New Geneva, of all the species that had suffered under imperial rule throughout galactic history. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. They had paid the price for a lesson that had transformed the galaxy. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to show mercy. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and at the center of it all, humanity had proven that their greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military might, but their refusal to become the very monsters they had fought against. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what humanity had intended. The end continue? Type yes to explore what happens next in this galaxy of cooperation, or suggest a new direction for the story to take.